Good evening, sons and daughters of God. I trust that I find you well. I trust that I find you in the peace of God. I trust that the goodness and mercy of God is increasing, always, continuously, consistently. I trust that your lives are continuously taking an upward progression. That I trust, that I believe, that as you are in the hands of the Master, you are going to be far from failure. Welcome to our 6th lesson. We have a few lessons to go. We have some areas to touch, and I believe each and every one of us is going to be helped immensely. Last week we talked about one of the investment firms or one of the investment banks which I mentioned, called Merrill Lynch, which was part of many banks and investment banks, pension funds, hedge funds, which in America at that time were indulging in massive profiteering through these financial securities, which I mentioned as mortgage-based securities, home loan securities, which they were tying together, and when they were bundled together, they were being sold as one loan. But in selling them, the incentive to buy them was that they were being backed by a major insurance firm. And most of these companies who were doing this practice of securing their bundled loans, their bundled high-risk loans. By bundled, I mean they would group together loans. And those loans, like I mentioned last week, there were many because the home market or the home ownership market in that time, it was high. It was high. It started off legitimate, but it then got influenced by how they allowed subprime loans or high-risk loans to be part of the ownership bubble. So the push that eventually was there in the housing market was not, it was manufactured. It was not genuine. It was not because people had means financially to pay back loans for the homes that they had taken, for the homes that they had taken out these loans for. It was now because the banking industry, the financial industry had managed to manufacture systems. They had managed rather to manufacture interest by lowering and adjusting their systems to allow people who would normally not be to allow people who normally not have access to loans, to allow them just to borrow so that they can have houses. So the major backer of now these banks and investment firms who then sold these group loans or these grouped loans together, the major backer was, or the major insurer was in a company called American Insurance Group, or AIG. So these guys, they looked at it as this is low risk. The housing market is stable. This is free money for us, because all they were supposed to do was to ensure potential default. But as they looked at it, the economy was stable, the housing market was stable. So according to them, what really was the potential of high levels of default? Everyone to some extent was being able to pay their mortgages. So what really was the risk for them? For them, it was benefit, just because they had a good name, because all insurance companies, they have ratings that they are given. So AIG was one of the most highly rated insurance companies which was operating at that time. So because they had a very high rating, in essence, when they agreed to tie their name to a package or to a bundle of these loans became more attractive, because whoever then would be buying them, in essence, they are buying them because of the goodwill tied to the insurance company who would back these loans if they went bad. But AIG during this time became very, let's say, greedy or selfish. And what they then began to do is that they then began to take on more loans. They then began to insure rather more loans. They then offered more credit default swaps or more security for loans than they had financial assets or property at hand, because they just kept reasoning, if everything remains normal, where is the loss? Because all we are doing is taking on these loans, and when we take on these loans, we are receiving premiums for them, because we are being paid just to offer security in the event that there is going to be a default. And what are the chances that there is going to be default among the loans which we have secured or given security of insurance for? So I mentioned last week some of the things that happened that led to mortgage or loan rates rising, and those high risk defaulters failing now to pay back their loans. And when they fail to pay back their loans, the housing market then began to struggle, because now if the interest rate for your mortgage goes up, it means the overall price you are going to pay for your house is no longer, it far exceeds market value. So even if you then want to sell off your house, you can never sell it at market value. You will then have to sell it at a far less price than your repayment amount, because of the level of shaking and instability that had hit the housing market at that time. Because markets speak, and when markets speak, and when markets respond to economic fiscal adjustments, a downturn can happen. So there was lowered interest. There was lowered interest in the housing market. People were no longer willing to take on mortgages. People were no longer willing to buy to buy into the idea of mortgages for houses. The housing market got in heavily influenced. Now, subsequently, AIG, the insurance company, saw that they were in trouble because they couldn't. All these other banks and all these ones that had been paying premiums to AIG, they thought they were safe because they were thinking, okay, even if these guys they fail to pay back the people who have given loans, it's not a problem because what we have is a credit default swap or assurance from AIG that if these guys fail, we are paid back. So banks were relatively settled because they thought even if the housing market shakes and falls, even if people begin to default payments, at least we are going to be covered. Why? We insured against loss, but they did not insure against the bad practice that AIG had undertaken because AIG undertook or they took on more, they took on the responsibility to cover more loans than they had financial or property assets at hand. And I gave you a period that all this happened in a 3-year period. And from being one of the highest rated, richest insurance companies in America, because of what happened when things began to turn around in the market, AIG, in 1 year, they became financially bankrupt and they had to shut down. What does bankrupt mean? When you are bankrupt or you declare bankruptcy, it's when you go to the courts and you go to the courts and you declare to the courts that we are now in a position where we have more liabilities than assets. So it's actually a legal procedure where you declare for bankruptcy that we are now no longer able to function as a viable organization or company. Why? We now have existing liabilities which exceed our assets. But now their liabilities, if you look at it, their liabilities are connected to banks. And banks are part of managing the economic system of the nation. So what has affected AIG as an insurance firm is subsequently affecting banks. And what then affected the banks, it led to an influence on financial firms connected to those banks. It led to the stock market crashing, and eventually it led into what is called the Great Recession. Now, you can do your own research on that. I don't want to go too deep into that, but this American financial crisis, it led into what was called a Great Recession, an experience of lowered economic activity, which not only touched America, but it touched also other nations. Because of globalization, economies are interconnected. Because of globalization, there are banks which are interlinked in their operations from country to country, which may borrow from one another. And now when there is such a heavy impact, an economic downturn, a period of instability in America, It then eventually has a knock-off effect, because one major insurance company was irresponsible, but not only them, those that kept on going to that insurance company to secure their high value, their high risk loans were also irresponsible, because they knew that we had taken up high risk loans. That's why they needed insurance for that. But they were banking on the environment remaining stable. And this is the mentality that people always have. All things are going to remain as they are. And when you have a mentality of all things are going to remain as they are, you are never going to be ready for the season of a downturn. You are never going to be ready for the season of a shift. Never. It became suddenly a knock-off effect. Everyone is now responding. Because you can imagine when companies are holding billions in value worth of loans, and those loans fail, those are billions of losses. And banks had used depositors' money. They had used depositors' monies to invest in these securities. Some of them to invest. By invest, it means to buy them, because they were now connected to a high-rated insurance firm, so they became an attractive financial product. We buy them because for us, all things being equal, it can become a property investment. If money doesn't come to us, a property will come to us. But in the long term, all that went down the drain. But look at it, banks have used depositors' money. It means banks have now lost money which did not essentially belong to them, but belong to the people, belong to depositors. A bank called Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest banks in America at that time, failed. Also declared bankruptcy. A big bank with a big name. Think about it. If you had your funds in such a bank, how would you feel finding out the day after that that bank is saying, we no longer even have money at hand for now to pay back or to make available to our depositors? There now has to be a systematic selling of the assets of the bank, or the bank has to be bailed out by the government to receive loans that they can become solvent again and begin to function as a bank, or that they can begin to have money available either to just pay off depositors and close, or money they receive money to keep on functioning. The 2008 financial crisis in the United States is key. It is key. There were some people who discerned that a financial crash was going to come to the United States because they saw the practices which were going on at that time, and they saw that this is not sustainable. There were others who were well learned concerning finances. There were economists. There were people who saw the trends, the practices of banks during that time, because banks had lobbied for the laws which were regulating them from using depositors' monies or monies which they had at hand in certain investments to be lifted. They lobbied for deregulation. And two laws were passed during that time. And when these laws were passed, these laws allowed, one of these laws was called the Financial Services Modernization Act, which allowed banks to use people's deposits to invest in various financial products which were available for investment. They said we need this deregularization so that we can compete with foreign banks and foreign firms. The second deregulation act was called the Commodity Futures Act, or the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. This one was an act which they pushed for because they didn't want the Federal Reserve. They didn't want the financial institutions in America which had oversight over banks to be controlling how to be controlling and to be monitoring how individual banks would be investing their monies. They didn't want that oversight. What they wanted was a veil of absence of transparency, if I can put it like that. So they were lobbying on the outside for whatever they wanted to do to be under their knowledge only, which gave them leeway now to bad business practices, gave them leeway to give out loans to people they would not normally give out loans to. And all this behavior, it became a knock-on behavior. They did that. They went to insurance firms. That insurance firm, no one was overseeing that. They had now taken on more loans than they can pay back because they are now basing it on all things are going to remain equal. And just what happened, banks closing down, insurance firms declaring themselves bankrupt, the government had to come in to bail out some firms because some hedge funds, some pension funds, some investment banks, they went completely broke. They had to be helped, receiving loans from the government, going into billions, because these loans that they had undertaken, which were high risk, they failed, and now the insurance firm is failing to pay back. It ran out of money. So some companies were completely exposed because they had on loans at the end which are of a far worth more value than they are as a company, than the assets they have, than the monies they have. The companies went completely broke. Now, think how many lives have been affected. Going now into what is called a recession, an economic downturn, a reduction in economic activity, a reduction in economic production. During the recession, about 8 million, that period of a recession, there were 8 million jobs which were lost in the United States alone. 8 million jobs. The people who lost those jobs, they were they were probably indirectly connected to the activity that had happened. Very far from it. But they have become a victim of the shifts of the environment. The letter to say we can no longer employ you came after these companies have failed. But for them to connect, why am I losing my job? Why is there a crisis in America today? They can't connect it. They can't. Because sometimes when shiftings happen in an economy, it is the layman, the individual family man who is affected. It is the individual woman, the family woman who is affected. Because companies can shut down. 2.5 million businesses were devastated during that recession. It's not a joke to say 2.5 million businesses. It's not a joke to say 8 million jobs. 8 million people lost their jobs. 2.5 million businesses were devastated. Because when there's an economic downturn, they are always victims of that downturn. Always. They are always victims. They are always those who are attacked, who feel the brunt and the force of that downturn. And because the US dollar is trusted and it's a valued currency around the world, you'll find that most well-functioning nations, even their governments have reserves of the US dollar. By reserves, I mean they keep store of the US dollar. Even the governments of well-running nations, they keep stores of the US dollar. Yes, because it's a well-respected currency. And it's like a de facto currency of the whole world. It's like the global currency of the world to an extent. Why? Most nations respect the US dollar. You'll find that a great percentage of the US dollars which are printed in the United States, they are in other nations all across the world. So now imagine the US dollar is affected. What then happens to currencies which are being backed by the strength of the US dollar? Let's say the US dollar falls. And you have it in store as a de facto backing of your own currency. It means your own currency also has fallen in value because the backing for your currency is the US dollar. All those that have trade investments with the United States, all the foreign banks, which were also depending on access to currency, access to money from banks in the United States, that cross-national lending system was cut off for a time. What happens to those other nations? There's a shaking. So what can happen in one nation, especially if it's a strong nation, especially if it's a nation which has a strong currency, it can have offshoot impact on other nations. It can have impact on other nations gradually. Let's say we get our fuel as a nation coming through Mozambique. What happens if by a terrorist act the flow of fuel is cut off from Mozambique to every nation that it is supplying and feeding? How many nations are going to have no access to fuel? And look at what happens when there is no fuel available in a nation, the offshoot impact. I'm just saying this so that you take note that there are things that can happen at certain or in certain countries which have a key resource, or who are key suppliers to other nations, or who have a strong currency which is interlinked to other nations, or who are a trade supplier with another nation. There are certain, a trade partner rather, with other nations. There are certain things which can happen to them which can impact several other countries. So an attack on the finances of a smaller nation doesn't have to come to them directly. It can come to the nations which they are connected to, which have a currency or a system of economy which they are dependent on or connected to somehow. So you have to think about it. If your pastor is connecting location and prosperity, we have to look at those intricacies of what can influence a location. That's why I've been going around like this, to show you that there are influences around a location which can impact heavily on prosperity. Heavily. So when those economic shifts are about to come, they have to be discerned. They have to be understood and interpreted. Because it's not everyone, even during that time, who suffered. Those who interpreted the coming season of the financial crisis in America, those who interpreted the coming financial crisis in America, they prospered. And they became extremely rich during that time. So when lack or economic shiftings are coming, you then have to understand how to behave before they come so that you may prosper during the time of shifting. Joseph discerned. After the king had two dreams, and those two dreams, Joseph interpreted them well. And Joseph gave them a strategy, because it's not only enough to know that famine is coming, but what are you going to do in the time of shaking? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because all understanding receives value. The understanding of the season receives more value by the wisdom that comes with the understanding of the season. If I know it's rainy season is coming, I then can position myself to take advantage of the rainy season, which means before the rain, I prepare the field. I do the plowing. I do the clearing of the land. I do the land preparation, do the plowing. I align all things that must be aligned. I buy my seed and then I do the sowing. But if I don't, but if I know that the rainy season is coming and I don't prepare, it means I can't take advantage of the season. Which means it's not enough to interpret the dreams. The key is after interpretation. The first point of victory, interpreting the dreams. Second point of victory, what do I do? What do I do? Because if you then don't tie wisdom to your interpretation of the coming seasons, you then become a victim. Joseph suggested that for the 7 years of prosperity, there should be a reserve of the harvest at a rate of 20%, so that every year the nation at large preserves 20% of their national harvest. So every year, Joseph said, guys, we're going to have silos. And from every harvest we have, we are going to set aside seed at a rate of 20%, or a fifth of their harvest. So for 5 years, for 7 years, it means they have, after 7 years rather, going into the 8th year, they have a total harvest which covers a whole complete year and a portion of a second year harvest. I hope you're following me. Because they were saving a fifth. After 5 years, they have reserved or preserved a year's harvest in total. And then another fifth, and then another fifth. So they have a year's harvest and almost half a year's harvest in preservation before they enter into the time of famine. Re-emphasizing my point again that they must be consistent. Joseph is saying our harvest today in our time of prosperity must have communication with our future. We are earning today. Let's not consume everything today. Let's talk to our future. To walk in dominion over famine seasons. Before the famine season approaches, kill the appetite to consume everything. If you're always operating by full consumption, like I said, you are in a risky position and you are leaving yourself exposed. This is the first most basic principle. From your income today, there must always be a setting aside of income to use for the future. Savings. This is the most basic. Yet people don't take it seriously because, like American Insurance Group, all things will remain equal. The housing market won't fall. Like the banks, who had insured this mortgage, who had taken out insurance on these mortgage-based securities, all things are going to remain equal. Very few people are going to default. The housing market is not going to fall. Like those homeowners who took loans, who managed to pay these loans seem manageable. All things are going to remain equal. Like that victim of a job loss among the 8 million, like that victim among the 2.5 million businesses who were affected during that crisis, all things were going to remain equal. But all things didn't remain equal. Be strong in savings. Before we can even go into the depth of anything, let's start on the very simple. Be strong in savings. Be strong in savings. How strong are you in your preservation ability? How strong are you in your ability to preserve resources? How strong? How strong? Joseph set a national rate of 20% of income. What's your percent? What percentage of your income do you save? From your present income, you must have a part which is preserved and set aside as savings, passive income. Okay? You must have what I will call or define as passive income. Money has come in. But what is my passive income? That's the income which is not going to be used. I call it passive because there is no activity pertaining that income except savings. If you're going to be saving it in a bank account, yes, it remains passive in the sense that you're not using it, although it may be active in the sense that it is attracting interest. So the terminology of passive is tied to the non-usage of the money or to the lack of use connected to the money. You must have passive income from everything you earn. I don't know what rate you are going to set. And I don't know why it may be important for you to set that rate. But I think it's wise. If you were not strong in savings, be strong in savings. Strength may not only come in amount, but it comes in consistency. It comes in consistency. Secondly, you must have a part of your income which is not passive but which is productive or active income. You must have a part of your income which is not passive but which is active. What do I mean? By active, I mean you must have a part of your income which you assign to make money for you. Using money to make money. Instead of consumption, we preserve. That's passive income. Instead of consumption, we create. That's active income. So you must have a twofold approach of savings and wealth creation. From what you are earning, what percentage is creating wealth for you? And let me say this. Creation of wealth can also involve investing in knowledge. You attain a qualification which can get you a better job, a better salary, which can make you unique in the marketplace. That's wealth creation. But it's coming through the route of investing in yourself. So indirectly, you are using your money to create wealth for you. That's wisdom. That's wealth creation. It may not be an immediate return, but it's an investment, because investments are creative. Investments are channels to create or to continuously produce wealth. You must have passive and active income. You must have a portion of your present income to preserve that savings and to create. Those are your investments, to preserve income and to create income. Psalms chapter number 126, verse 5 and 6. So now I've laid the foundation. Now we are beginning to go forward. I've laid the foundation. Now we are going forward. Psalms chapter number 126, verse 5. You've understood the crux of what I have to say. Influence, rather prosperity and location are tied. And as they are tied, famine can come upon a location. Famine has to be discerned. And after the discernment of famine, the wisdom of dealing with the famine is now where we are entering into. Psalms chapter number 125, verse 5 and 6. I'll use the ISV version, which says, "Those who weep while they plant will sing for joy while they harvest. The one who goes about weeping, carrying a bag of seeds, will surely return with a joyful song, bearing sheaves from his harvest." Now, for me, looking at those two verses, verse 5 and verse 6, they are one verse in essence, or they are two verses carrying the same message. Verse 6 is a more detailed version of verse 5. Verse 5 says, "Those who weep as they plant will sing for joy as they harvest." Take note of these areas which are being juxtaposed or being set aside or being presented to you side to side. Okay? Those who weep while they plant. So you're seeing weeping being introduced, planting being introduced, will sing for joy, joy being introduced, or singing for joy being introduced while they harvest. That's verse 5. Verse 6, the one who goes out weeping, weeping being introduced, carrying a bag of seeds. Planting, that's planting, carrying a bag of seeds being introduced, will surely return with a joyful song, joy again, bearing sheaves from his harvest, harvest again. So there are two verses which are saying the same thing. The juxtaposition of weeping and joy and planting and harvest. The presentation side to side of weeping and joy, and of planting and of harvest. telling us that the season of creation of wealth may be painful, but the season of harvest will be joyful. It is easy right now to find joy in consuming all you have, because you feel satisfied when you manage to meet all your needs. Because there is great joy at the harvest time. That's the time of supply. That's the time when then you can meet needs from your harvest. But laboring, most people, they enjoy obviously getting money from the client. They enjoy the day of pay, of their pay, the day the salary comes in. They enjoy the day they receive the money more than the days they are working for the money. Because when you are working, you are planting. But when you are receiving income, that's the harvest time. But get this, a joyful future is made by deciding to use parts of your harvest today as a seed to create a future income for you tomorrow. A joyful future is created today, or is decided, or is made by deciding to use a part of your harvest today as a seed to create future income tomorrow. You have to make a decision to create a joyful future, because joy is attached to harvest. That desire you have to harvest, it's a desire which is attached to a season of joy. Because the truth is, it's not a good feeling not to have money. It's not enjoyable. We don't place our faith in the presence or absence of money. No, I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying. Naturally, it's a good feeling to know that you have money. Yes, even the kinds of prayers you make, they change. They change. You are more grateful, you are more thankful. You are less akin to grumbling and complaining in your prayers. Your anger reduces. Your bitterness with people and with situations, it's lessened. I'm not saying you should have your emotions or your prayers influenced by money, but I'm saying to the mature, there is a way that money does have an impact on feeling, even attitude and thought. You are less urgent in certain matters. You are relaxed, you are calm. You are not under attack from the landlord. You are settled. Oh my God. Use today to create a joyful future by deciding to use a part of your harvest for preservation, and for wealth creation. Create and preserve. Create, preserve. Create, preserve. Create and preserve. Hear me very well, child of God. What you can save and what you can use to create wealth is dependent on what I would call your first or your initial source, or is dependent on your sources of income. Okay? What you can save and what you can invest is dependent on your income. And it's dependent on the demands which are on your income. Because someone is really going to say, really, from what I get, it's just about meeting all my needs. I'm breaking even. I really have limited free income. I really have limited unoccupied income. So for me to really think of allocating savings and investments, I have a problem. I have a problem. How do I go about it? How do I go about it? What do I do? I have no extra income left over either to save or invest. How do I go about it? Because I'll answer that. If not in this lesson, because tomorrow I want us now to touch into other things. Because now we are going forward, we have to move. Okay, get this. A large number of people can save, but they struggle to enter into income creation. They struggle to establish another source of income. If they have a job, their job is their primary source of income. If they have a business, their business is their primary source of income. They are self-employed. Whatsoever they do is their primary and only source of income. So they just have income at a primary level, and that's the only income which they have. Which they either fully use or they have some savings. And because I understand many can be saying, I just don't have enough fluid income to invest in what I need to invest in. Okay, I hear you. Then what you should be doing is you should be giving vision to your savings. Why are you saving that small amount which you are saving? Why are you saving it? Why is it gradually increasing? Why? Because all savings must have vision. The reason why you don't have consistency even when you save, you have no vision attached to your savings. You are just saving for the sake of, oh, it's good to save. Why are you saving? There must be a reason. Are you just saving to say, okay, I'm saving because it is wise and I don't know what can happen tomorrow? Yes, that's vision. You are prepared for future. Okay, I am saving in order to be able to meet future occurrences. That's vision. But if you then want to also go into another stream of income, and you can't create it from your first level of income. You can't use what is left over to create. You then have to save with the goal of investing. You then have to save with a target to say, if I attain this amount from my savings, I am going to use that amount to establish another stream of income for me, to establish my business venture, to establish my project, to establish another line and area which I'm going to use to make money. What is the goal tied to your savings? If you have little fluid income and you just have enough for your primary savings, then you must also target to save to invest. Because we are never going to grow unless we begin to establish ourselves in wealth creation. Savings alone will not be enough. We need to go into creation of wealth. Savings are very important, crucial. It's a massive financial discipline. It can never be altered. Can never be altered. It's necessary. But also have the vision attached to your savings. It may be wise to save to invest. It may be wise to save to invest. Now, hear me. Hear this, hear this, hear this. But one can be saying, it will take me a long time. A long, long time, even if I save to invest to get there. Child of God, you need then to fight. If saving to invest in future will not work for you, then we need to go to the source of your primary income. We are troubleshooting. We need to go to the source of your primary income. If we can't develop it and add to it by bringing another stream of income, then we need to go troubleshoot and go to the source of your primary income. What is the current, listen to me, what is the current value in monetary terms of your working hour of labor? I'll ask that question again. What is the current value in monetary terms of your hour of labor? Hear me very well. What is the current value in monetary terms of your working hour of labor? All right? Let's say you work 9 hours a day for about, 9 hours per day for about 26 days a month. All right? 9 hours a day for 26 days a month. Others, it's less, okay? But I'm just saying, you work Monday to Saturday, okay? Whatever it may be. 25, 26 days a month. Let's just work with whatever I say. 26 days a month, which is about 234 hours of labor per month. Those are your hours of labor. Those are the hours you are working per month. That month, let's say, you've worked for 234 hours. In that month, you earn 6,000 rands. Okay? It means your your time value per hour, your value in monetary terms per your hour of labor is 6,000 rands divided by 234 hours, and your value presently per hour is 25 rand 60 per hour, which means you are earning per hour of labor 25 rand and 60 cents. That's your value per hour. Okay? So every one of your working hours that month brings in 25 rand and 60 cents. Every hour you are working, you are bringing in 25 rand and 60 cents. But get this. So now, if then you want more income, it means you have to raise your time value per hour. You have to raise the income you are getting per month, which leads to your time value per hour increasing. Because the challenge we have people who tithe, who give, but they never work on increasing their time value per hour. Never. Yet the blessing which is coming from their giving and tithing is supposed to take them into excess time value. But they don't apply themselves, and they don't venture to be more expressive in the marketplace, that they increase even the number of hours per month which is producing money for them. Because listen to me, child of God, in a whole month, if I say you are only working for 234 hours, that means 234 hours. If a day has 24 hours, that means per month you are only really working for less than 10 days. It means out of every 30-day period, you are only making money for 10 days. And the other 20 days are 20 days which are not producing any income. When we now want progress financially and prosperity, we must increase our time value. That the number of days which are productive for us per month increase. My God. If the number of days which are productive for you per month don't increase, if your time value does not increase, you will live from hand to mouth, rental to rental, grocery purchase to grocery purchase. Everything comes to be consumed. Why? You are only using labor for a third of the month. Labor maybe for a quarter, a fifth, depending on what you do of the month. Calculate your own time value according to your hours of labor. Because mind you, your costs when they come, they don't come apportioned to working hours. Your costs come apportioned to either to a fixed term. If it's school, it's a month. If it's rent, it's monthly. If it's obligations to other institutions you need to pay back, these are monthly 30-day obligations. Yet you are not making money to cover every day. You are making money 10 days of the month. You are working 9 hours for 26 days. 26 days times 9 hours, 234 hours. Divide that by How many hours are in a day? We come back to less than 9.75 days, 10 days. That's the number of days you are productive. 25 rand 60 an hour. Your productivity covers 10 days a month, 20 days of inactivity. You have multiplicity of downtime. 20 days of downtime where money is not coming in, where income is not coming in. Your time value needs to rise. If you want to be wealthy, dominate time. Right now, time is dominating you because you are producing less days than the time in a month. You are producing less hours. You are working, you are being productive rather in less hours. In less hours than are there in a day. So men of God, are you saying, can you be productive for 24 hours? Your time value is what equates that. I'm not saying work for 24 hours, but there are men and women who have established companies. Some of them now online at any time of the day. Money is coming in because they established systems. And they have a high time value. Wealth is accessed by ability to dominate time. Wealth is accessed by ability to dominate time. Okay, tomorrow I'll have to pick it up from time value. And then we are going to go to Genesis. There's something I need to show you. There's something I need to show you. There's something I need to show you from the book of Genesis. And we may be using the book of Genesis and other few scriptures, but mainly the book of Genesis chapter 2 to finish off the lessons for this week. The next week we'll move to more examples of biblical wisdom in a family. Time value, my son. Time value, my daughter. I want you to look at your income. How much money you're making per month. Add it up. Look at your hours of productivity. The hours that you're working. Calculate your time value per hour. I know for some business it may not be as easy. For some ventures it may not be easy and practical to really calculate. But your hours, your working hours and your income, calculate them. In a 30-day period, totalize how many days make up activity and how many days are downtime, because it is the days of downtime which fight and eat up days of profit. Mazuva asiri kugadzirwa mari akawanda than mazuva ari kugadzirwa mari, and hatipfumi nenzira dzakadaro. We must raise our time value. God bless you, my son. God bless you, my daughter.